Hi, my name is Malibu. Hello again. This is the second part of the series. In this portion, we will discuss the same topic, but will go into greater depth. The webinar is about providing equitable and accessible services with culturally diverse families. The previous webinar, part 1, began with an overview of the concepts to help you visualize the big picture. Now we will dive deeper and discuss the how to engage with the family. It's easy to think about applying skills when working with families, but really it starts with looking inward to know ourselves. To truly understand the root of the family's experience, we have to understand ourselves first. During the webinar, you may notice some new terms and techniques that are relevant to this work. These terms and techniques will help you to provide equitable services with families. In this webinar, you will also have the opportunity to assess your understanding of diverse families. From the outside, it can be easy for us to think we have a deep understanding of family dynamics, but true understanding comes when we first turn inward and assess ourselves. It's crucial to know our own roots. Once we understand and know our roots, we become conscious of our reactions and internal influences when connecting with families. We start with ourselves first. In this portion, we'll explore different terminologies, ideologies, and techniques for examining our roots to help us align and connect meaningfully with families. As I mentioned, we will dive deeper. In the process, it's possible that some of the information, terms, or examples may feel uncomfortable or even trigger you. At such times, pause the video. Don't watch the whole thing. Think about how you are feeling. If you don't feel okay, take a break. Take care of yourself. When you're ready, you can continue. To do this work, you must keep your heart and mind open. There will be some things that you will disagree with when working with families. It's important to reflect. Ask yourself, what hesitancy and roadblocks are coming up for me? We must assess ourselves constantly. Keep your heart and mind open. Sometimes we ask ourselves why families do this or that, and why students do certain things. Listen for understanding. Ask questions. Explore further. There are so many things that we still do not know. Take an opportunity to look closer. There are many truths out there. There is no one truth. Maybe a specific truth is important for one person, but is not the truth. It's important as we look at people's lived stories to recognize there are many truths. Life is full of multiple truths. Make sure you include that mindset in your work. While doing this work, never stop unpacking. Once you begin, there is no going back to square one. Once you are in this anti-racist work, you are in it for life. This is a lifelong journey. Again, when we work with families, they are always the expert. We may be tempted to believe we are already ahead, aware, and more accessible than they are. But they are always the experts in their own lives. Before I begin this section, I'd like to remind you that I identify as a deaf, multiracial cis woman. These identities impact my access to certain privileges. Some resources are easy to access, while others are less accessible for me. For example, as a light-skinned person, I can access certain privileges that dark-skinned people cannot. Some information I share today may not be pertinent. I haven't experienced all forms of oppression or worked with families who have. Thus, what I share today will not be all-encompassing and give answers to every scenario you may experience. It is my hope that it may just be a scratch on the surface as a starting point in your understanding of how to work with culturally diverse families. It's based on my experience, so your goal is to expand your understanding from my own narratives. That quote is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's posted in my office and I see it every single day. It inspires me daily. In our society, Malcolm X is often seen in a negative light and perceived as violent and a troublemaker. This is the common message I received growing up whenever someone talked about Malcolm X. Like I've mentioned before, as we move through life and learn more, our perspectives shift. My understanding of Malcolm X evolved, and I now know that his philosophy and perspective of life is beautiful. So I thought I would share this quote with you. We need more light about each other. Light creates understanding. Understanding creates love. Love creates patience. And patience creates unity. Once we are unified, we can dismantle the system that has perpetually harmed and oppressed marginalized communities. Though Malcolm X said these words many years ago, they still ring true today in 2021. While going through the webinar today, I want to again remind you, please be aware there are certain terms we need to know when we are doing our daily anti-racism work. We see these words often, but they may be triggering. It is important if you feel a certain term is hard to watch or talk about or brings up difficult memories, pause and take care of yourself. Stereotyping. Stereotyping is having a fixed mindset and overgeneralization of a certain group. It could be of families, people of a particular race, gender, LGBTQIA, the trans community, drag, people whose skin is brown. It's grouping all members into a category and assigning the same traits to every person in the group. For example, Black people are lazy, or homeless people are addicted to drugs. These are common stereotypes. There exist both positive and negative stereotypes. In one way, it may help us respond quickly when working with a family. However, a stereotype can be harmful if I'm incessantly unaware of my prejudices. It may come up in staffings or incident reports and is consistently negative. Even a so-called positive stereotype is not always positive. For example, Asians are often viewed as math experts, but not all Asians are good at math. And then we are confused or baffled when an Asian person doesn't like math. We think, that doesn't fit with my stereotypical view of who Asians are. It is harmful to the student. It's important that we recognize the differences among people within the same group. It may be true that some things are shared amongst members. Perhaps group members share the same core values or certain beliefs, but it doesn't mean they are the same in every way. The same is true of deaf people. We seem to be similar, but there are differences within the deaf community. Stereotyping can be positive or negative. When your implicit stereotyping is unaddressed, it leads to prejudices. This can really hurt someone by discriminating against them and leading to more violence towards them. Now, take a close look at the picture shown. Ask yourself, who did I notice first? The person you noticed, what is their identity? What do they look like? Are they similar or different from you? Now, with the picture in full screen, who do you notice immediately? Are they similar to you or different from you? Which of the people do you trust immediately? Who do you feel an immediate click with? What assumptions do you make about each person that you see in the picture? Yes, I recognize it's an illustration, but what was your initial reaction? If you were there in the room, what thoughts and feelings would arise? Write down a few notes. Don't try to explain or cover up your initial reaction. Just take notes. Doing so will help us move the subconscious thoughts to the forefront, where we can evaluate them to see if they are false beliefs. By doing this work, it will help us become aware of our biases. We cannot fully remove bias. Bias helps us experience the world and helped us become who we are today. Many of our biases come from our family environment growing up and from what we were taught and saw in different media. We absorbed all of that growing up. Our bias helps us survive by helping us detect what is dangerous and what is safe. We cannot remove all biases entirely. It's important to recognize which biases are harmful and which are beneficial. Notice biases and become aware of them. Prejudice is a baseless but strong view. It's really not based on anything, no criteria or any reasoning. It's just there. It can be favorable or unfavorable about a certain group of people. It can mean Black men don't like white people or vice versa. It is baseless, but is extremely harmful to the person experiencing prejudice because prejudice keeps people divided. Bias and stereotyping can lead to prejudice. It may be prejudice towards a certain gender, race, sexual orientation, or religion. In the news today about people in Pakistan and Iran, we see division and turmoil. It is not always in regards to race, but about different intersectionality, and is much more complicated than a single issue. Everything is connected. It is never just one thing in isolation. The same is true when prejudice is present. It's not isolated to a single group. Within every group, its members are unique and different, but having a prejudice mindset doesn't allow us to explore that. It prevents us from challenging the bias and the stereotypes held about certain groups. It is strongly influenced by media, books, movies, TV shows, daily interactions, and family. These combine to influence our bias. If we don't address this process, it then turns into prejudice, and this prejudice can prevent your families from being able to receive services. If we don't address how we write reports about our families, or how we write emails, or how we talk about certain families, if we don't address it, it will create further barriers for the families. Like I mentioned in the previous webinar, the system can be oppressive, and if you don't address your prejudice, it will only perpetuate the system's oppression of families. Suppose we decide to ignore prejudice and maintain the status quo. It can ultimately lead to extreme violence. For example, after the events of 9/11 and the World Trade Center, Muslims became the targeted and hate towards them developed. At airports, they were subject to more scrutiny and screenings. Americans made assumptions that all Muslims were terrorists. But we can stop and recognize that this isn't actually true. Similarly, not all white people are uniform or are automatically good. There are those that do severely hurt others. For example, there were the AAPI victims who were shot by a white person. But we don't talk about it. We usually shift focus to people of color who are violent. But the truth is that there are specific people found in all communities that commit violence. Also to note is how Black people are portrayed in media. For example, it's typical for B-rated horror movies to almost always have the Black man or Black woman die first. After the Black characters have died, it is common for the movie to progress by showing how the white male character survives to the end of the movie. This media portrayal molds our daily societal values. Regarding undocumented immigrants and migrants, they are subject to ICE raids, people making threats, and officials being called to come after them. There are restaurants with undocumented immigrant employees living in daily fear because of others threatening to call ICE. Perhaps they fled their country for a good reason, but there are prejudices by people that assume they are taking our jobs. This is a result of not addressing prejudice and allowing it to grow into hate and fear. This leads to an inability to connect with people on that level. When our prejudice is left unaddressed, it leads to conflict and cross-cultural conversation is no longer possible. Prejudice leads to discrimination, and that simply cannot continue in our work. While they're called microaggression, micro-invalidation, and micro-insults, there is nothing micro about it. These are something that marginalized people experience constantly. As a deaf person, BIPOC, AAPI, and LGBTQIA, these experiences occur daily and create small shifts in daily life. It can include comments, eye contact, or when I provide feedback and they seem to assume I'm unintelligent, testing, assessments, but the person has specific bias and assumptions about certain groups. If this is continually happening to a specific family member, it may appear inconsequential, but imagine it occurring every single day. Like a paper cut, one isn't a big deal, but imagine if it's cut again and again and again. Every time the person tries to heal, it's cut again. That's a microaggression. And when it hurts, people lose their temper. And then people make comments, oh, she's an angry Black woman, or whoa, angry person, calm down. But it's a culmination of hurt over time. There are some phrases people use with good intentions, but they are based on subconscious biases that haven't even been addressed. Here are just a few examples. Oh, you're a mother and a hospital doctor? No wonder you are busy. And so maybe the person thinks because the mother is a busy doctor, she's therefore uninvolved and lazy at home. The reality is the commenter is taken aback that a doctor could also be a mother. On the surface, it seems like a compliment, but the subtext is insulting. Or, your family is really big. With so many people, it's really hard to keep track of who's who. Yes, it's pretty awesome to have a large family, but the microaggression behind the comment was, that family is too big, and that's typical of them. This phrase comes about from unconscious bias. It may seem ambiguous or difficult to react to this comment, but it's not a compliment. It was a microaggression. Or, you people seem to not trust me, so I'm not able to engage with those people. When anyone uses you people in their comment, it automatically connects with prejudice about certain groups of people. In this situation, it comes from an assumption that the person is at fault for not trusting the system and therefore not accessing services. So, where did you come from? I personally have heard this every day. These days, it's not as frequent as it used to be. People see my appearance as confusing or different. Is she African? Is she white? I can't tell. Once I say I'm multiracial, they say, oh, no wonder. Your dad's white and mom's multiracial? That makes sense. Many children who are also biracial or multiracial receive this microaggressive comment often. Where are you from? Reveals people making assumptions about multiracial children being undocumented, immigrants, and or from a country other than America. And in truth, none of us are from America except for indigenous people. The message is loud and clear when people use this phrase if the person is not white. Therefore, the person does not belong here. That explains why your child is not succeeding in one language in the classroom. It's because the multiple language being used at home. They have LSM, ASL, English, and Spanish. Oh, no wonder they need support in the language development. But actually, having multiple languages comes with many benefits. Maybe a student needs strategies to develop one dominant language. At deaf schools, American Sign Language is predominantly used, but if the family chooses spoken English, that's fine. What's important is validating and valuing whatever language these families use at home. These are only a few small examples of microaggressions that a family may experience on a daily basis. Microaggressions may seem trivial, but they are not. If you can imagine being in that position every day, you would grow weary of it too. Oppression. We did partially cover this topic in the first webinar. It is a malicious or unjust treatment or exercise of power, and it can be displayed either overtly or covertly. It is typically white hearing men who oppress white hearing women, who then oppress white deaf men, and that cascade of oppression continues down towards even more marginalized groups. The deaf community is amazing, but within it, there is oppression happening towards BIPOC, AAPI, and marginalization and targeting of trans people. This occurs because of oppression, and we in turn fight for power and access and can oppress others in that process. Most of the time, acts of oppression are done unintentionally. For example, when I'm presenting, I make sure my background is clear and my clothing isn't patterned. Some signers wear very busy clothing, and this can be very difficult for deaf-blind individuals. These acts are unintentional. The same issue exists with overly decorated PowerPoint. It looks nice, but this can be oppressive towards people who are not able to access the information. However, if you are aware that this is inaccessible for certain people and still do it anyways, then that is intentional oppression, which is even worse. Try to identify those unintentional oppressions and do your best to correct them. Oppression is something that is ongoing and it causes prolonged negative distress. It impacts targeted and marginalized communities such as LGBTQIA, race, gender, religion, age, color, and more. In the next few parts, we will be covering different forms and acts of oppression. though it's not limited to only what I am listing. It can be done individually, within groups, by institution, or systemically. It's like an onion peel. The oppression doesn't exist just on one level. Rather, it is interconnected. Audre Lorde says, you may have noticed that she is my favorite author. She explains concepts in ways that are easy to understand. You can see her in the docuseries 13th. Audre Lorde presents very clearly about oppression. I really enjoy listening to her work, and one of the things that stood out to me was when she said, there is no hierarchy of oppressions. I had discussed earlier oppression cascading down to marginalized groups, but this isn't to say that it's a competition and that one group's oppression is worse than others. Oppression is oppression. Meaning that if you want to fight for deaf rights or racism or LGBTQIA, you can't compare their oppressions and just fight for one group. You must recognize that all oppression is interconnected and all oppressive acts are wrong and must stop. Therefore, we must recognize there is no hierarchy of oppression and we must dismantle it all. By this point, you hopefully have a better grasp on these concepts and terminologies presented in this webinar. Now we will shift into talking about techniques that you can use in your work. One of the techniques that is being more frequently discussed comes from one small section of how to be an anti-racist. He says that we must name it to dismantle it. We can't simply see it and have a brief and fluffy discussion about it. Oh, that child seems to be challenging, or that family seems challenging to work with. A fluffy discussion isn't enough. We must name it. Racism, sexism, ageism, sizeism. We must name it in order to actively dismantle it. It doesn't work in staffing to only discuss superficial issues and services. No, we must be constantly naming the issue. Because if we don't, the oppression continues and our families and children will continue to suffer within the system. Instead, we must work with them to name issues like racism, so we can know what parts of our services are racist. Naming the parts of our services that are sexist, maybe it's in a form, FBA, IEP, or ARD meeting. How do we navigate that system for the families we serve? Naming it can help us strategize and identify techniques we need to change. Perhaps how we do sessions, in order to provide a full, equitable service for students and families receiving our services. That is a very long list of the different forms of oppression. I will talk about a few specific examples. For a more in-depth list, see the PowerPoint. Or if you research, you will see there is oppression for nearly everything. I will share some. Racism, oppression based on race. Those people not born of European descent or white skin are those that are often oppressed, meaning towards those in marginalized Black and brown communities. Autism, oppression based on ability to hear and access to verbal speech. It's based on an assumption that deaf people are unintelligent, can't write well, or that they are dumb. Our society has long assumed deaf people to be not fully capable and not fully human. But we know that is not true. Deaf people are brilliant, and we use American Sign Language to communicate. I'm capable of explaining concepts such as oppression using ASL, but the ideology of language belongs to the tongue, not hand, to communicate. So autism, that is one form of oppression. Ageism can involve assuming that students and children are not capable of making decisions. So we make decisions and goals for them, thinking they need their hands held to be successful, assuming they can't be successful on their own. Similarly, ageism affects the elderly. With the current pandemic, we focus so much on survival that we forget who has been hit hardest. The elderly in nursing homes and hospice have been most impacted by COVID-19, but we're so focused on ourselves. That is ageism. Xenophobia and religious prejudice is directed towards people who are from outside of America, of a different religion or not Christian and or not white. They're labeled as terrorists or awful people and should be pushed out of the community. And it's exacerbated from 9/11 and current news. Sexism is a prejudice directed towards women, viewing them as weak, unintelligent, that they shouldn't work and instead stay home to be caretakers and have families, or that they shouldn't be on their own and should depend on a man instead. That's sexism. Ableism is any prejudice regarding access to ability. This could be senses like sight or sensory experience, or it could be physical things like needing a ramp. Sometimes it's things you can't really see. As an able-bodied person, I can drive to work, walk up the stairs, I have access to reading and writing, and that is a privilege because I can have access to these abilities. For example, if I choose to go to a restaurant with family and friends and I'm aware that the location is only accessible by stairs and disregard someone's need for a ramp for access, that is ableism. Heterosexism is a prejudice towards LGBTQIA+ with an assumption that the society is heteronormative. This type of oppression discounts that humans are on a spectrum of sexuality. That is heterosexualism. Language deprivation, educationally disadvantaged, sizeism. Speaking of sizeism, there's a common bias that a thin person is more attractive, intelligent, more capable, and that they have more access. This leads to a feeling of trusting a thin person over an overweight one, because the bias is that an overweight person must be lazy. And this isn't true. Certain weights are just a result of the person's body type. Some people are at a certain weight because of their body types. Society has a specific view of what beauty is, and that is oppressive during job interviews, at school, and in other areas. Not conceiving children, either from infertility or making the personal choice to not have children, is often looked down upon by our society. Vidism is oppression towards accessibility in sites. For example, overly decorated PowerPoints can be difficult to see, or using a yellow background with a red font can be viewed by sighted people but inaccessible for those with color blindness or who are deafblind. That is vidism. Colorism, meaning a person makes assumptions based on skin color. Light-skinned people like myself are thought to be smarter, trustful, and easier to get along with, whereas darker skin is considered bad, dangerous, or criminal. Media plays a role in this bias as well as influence from families. Lookism regards a person's appearance or features. You can see I have some African features, which some people classify specific ones as quote-unquote good. This overlaps with colorism. If I had dark skin, I could be perceived differently. Classism looks at poverty and wealth. Richer people are thought to be trustful, smarter, and have everything in order as compared to those in poverty being viewed as lazy, poverty-stricken, and no good. Our system and society have specific ways to oppress certain groups of people. I have just named several types of oppression. It's not comfortable for me to name all of those oppressions, but our society and systems perpetuate harm to so many people. We must name it to dismantle it. Make time for reflection as a normal part of your work. It's easy for us to feel productive with a schedule of back-to-back meetings, but it is important to make sure you reflect on each of these meetings as well. Think about, did my session go well with that family? Did my email look okay? Or did my email seem condescending? Did the way I ask questions to the children come off condescending? Always have space to reflect throughout your day. When we have group processing work with other service providers, ask each other how our day went. Did we do our best to practice cultural responsiveness with the families that we serve? Should we do better? Analyze our company, organization, or agency and see how we can continue to improve ourselves and the program. In our daily reflection, we must make sure we don't continue to cause harm. We must make it a normal part of our daily work to reflect on these questions. There's another technique that I've used daily for the past 10 years in the field of anti-racism. I interact and engage with different people, and sometimes I realize that my instinct is telling me that I'm not listening and not seeing this person as whole. Then I become judgmental and condescending in my thoughts. When that happens, I compartmentalize these thoughts and feelings on the imaginary shelves. Hold on to it. Don't try to figure out the answers while working with the other people. This will only create bias and prejudices when I work with them. So I hold on to it on a shelf until I finish with the person that I'm working with. Then I analyze the thoughts and feelings after I'm done working with the family. I ask myself, why did I react that way in my thoughts? I try to figure it out. Often it was something they said had infuriated me or caused me to be defensive about my colleagues and workplace. Finding myself, I want to do better. I thought I was doing just fine until that person gave me feedback. I immediately became uncomfortable. It was about me and not about the person who was giving me feedback. Using the shelving technique is extremely helpful. Try it sometime for yourself. Use this technique when you notice any tension in your body, jaws, or shoulders. Put the thoughts on your imaginary shelf until you are done talking with the person. It will make a huge difference when interacting with different people. In this part, I will be sharing 3 different scenarios, and you will need to listen and reflect on these scenarios. You won't need to quickly answer or solve these scenarios. Just observe and ask yourself, does this happen in your workplace? Does this happen when you work with families, within your system? Maybe not exactly, but could be seen that way. Next, I'll have 3 stories. A child who identifies as a person of color is being adopted by a white deaf family. This child seems to struggle with complex PTSD, but their history prior to the orphanage is unknown. Maybe there was neglect, maybe language deprivation. The details aren't known. This child is struggling with emotion, behaviors, and language. This family is connected with you to provide support for them and the child to develop skills. You notice concerning behaviors from the parents, high stress and fatigue, and you see one of them say, I thought he would appreciate that we got him out of the orphanage. I didn't expect to have this much baggage to deal with on top of other things. What feelings came up for you? How would you process and possibly address this? The second scenario. A Black deaf child is being referred to you by the ARD team to provide services for her emotional needs or language needs. You have learned that her family is hearing and they are learning ASL. One of the parents informs you that they have no idea why their child is seeing you because they were not able to attend the ARD meeting due to childcare. After you explain what services will be provided, the parents are outraged to learn that their child is very delayed and they were not informed. What feelings came up for you? How would you process and possibly address this? Now the third. A new family will be coming and their child's first day of school will be in a couple of weeks. You notice that there were some conversations with the administration team and teachers that the deaf child's family is undocumented, hearing, and is multilingual. The language assessment has not been done, and the child hasn't arrived at school, but everyone seems to have an opinion about the student and concerns about possible delays. So, what feelings come up for you? How would you process and possibly address this? Now, within the different stories, there are perspectives to consider from families that you serve when working with you. Think about the family's deep distrust of the different systems, the intergenerational trauma from schools who, as history shows, have tried to strip away the family's culture to assimilate their family members. This means that school has a historical way of removing people's cultural roots and identities. This has happened to Black and brown students, and many of them survived in the predominantly white educational system, disconnected from their cultural identities. They don't trust you because of the system and/or because you are white. Or the families may trust you. You're trained, you have a degree, are certified, you're the expert. You make the decisions and let me know. Learned helplessness. You tell me what to do and I'll do it. That's a survival technique. Becoming emotional is draining, and thus it's better to accept what is given. It's not wrong. It's a response to trauma, to constant barriers, repeated trust violations. So know that some families may appear passive and say, whatever you decide is best. It's important to empower families. We will talk more about this in the third part. The program, agency, or school is too hard to navigate. Too many people contact the family, and they often feel confused about who the main contact person is. Some families get 7 different emails from 7 different people throughout the day about their child. It can cause confusion, and they worry, is my child okay? Should I trust that it's a safe environment? Why am I getting 7 different emails from different people? They need us to work with them and collaborate to meet the students' needs. They need us to work with them, not for them, neither above the other, but equal in the journey. There are often so many barriers, and we need to work with them to navigate through the system. That is all for the second part. Please take a look at this part and complete these activities before starting the third part of the series. There's a link that comes with this webinar for the implicit bias assessment. It's cool and free. You choose between words and it will reveal your bias. There are instructions. I thought I knew my bias, but I was surprised. There is specific bias in regards to specific things. Could be race, gender, and countless other things. I highly encourage you to take the assessment. It's free. It's an opportunity to learn more about yourself. No right or wrong, just more awareness of your biases. Make notes of the narratives, biases, and stereotypes in your daily life and work. I encourage you to add reflective thoughts, feelings, and notes throughout your days. If you have not watched these docuseries, I highly recommend you do. Both are on Netflix, 13th and Amend, and if you have the opportunity, get a copy of How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi. Thank you.